Hello and welcome to another QA-Automan tutorial. And in this lesson, we're going to go back to the get calls that we originally made, show you how we can split them out into reusable functions. We're going to create a new call where we're going to be using headers and path parameters and see how we can start kind of chaining our two calls together and utilizing things like path parameters, and to really show us the capabilities of the other parts of the request that we can start to utilize and use in our calls. So let's get into it. So the first thing we're going to do, if you remember, is we had the, the get booking IDs path. Now, what we want to do is we're going to introduce a new call, but we need to have this call be added to that. So this test is going to be somewhat of chaining the APIs together. So we're going to be test the get booking using ID from booking ID list, expect valid response. So we're going to be chaining this out, put our annotation here. So this is the thing. I also want to kind of make a callback to, I put test get call, and this is not really the best name for this because you want to be specific. What is it that that is under test? And this is the test get booking. So I'm going to make booking, I think, what's it called? It's booking IDs. So I'm going to put this here, and saying call is kind of redundant. And then this one is get booking, where we pass in an ID. And I'll show you what that looks like here in a second. So we want to pull this out and use it in our, as like a reusable client. So in Kotlin, I'm going to create a new package. And we'll call this one Booking API Client. And this is our thing that we use to make these kind of calls. So I'm going to then use a new Kotlin class, and this one will be named Booking API. Wait a minute. I do want to refactor this, rename. This one should just be client. This is if we have multiple clients that we're going to eventually take in, we want to put them all in one centralized location. And I think that's a good thing to kind of keep in mind. So with our booking API client, you'll notice I did create a class, but I'm going to switch this over to an object. And the reason we want to do this, and this is for my kind of personal thing I like to do when I kind of create my clients here, is I like to keep them static so I can just call them whenever I need to instead of having to initiate them. If you start kind of moving in a direction where you need to start building out mocks and then you kind of have to pass in some kind of object or that you need to instantiate, then it might make sense to move as a class. But for this pattern, I'm going to go with the object and keep them static. Going back to this, we have our call here. So I'm going to copy this over and call this function get, we're going to call get booking booking IDs, and paste it in here. And you're going to see some red because now we actually have a client that's going to give us some context where we can actually know a good place to store some of our data that we're reusing over and over again, so that in other classes we can now access these. So this is kind of similar to like the page object model. It's kind of like that approach. Yep, and this doesn't need to be a companion. Companion objects in classes are a way to kind of create static objects within a class that's not instantiated. But we have now our URI here, which gives it context, right? Because the booking API, this is the URI that is used. And these are the routes that exist as well that are specific to this API. So we can come back to this thing and we can get rid of some of this code here and import the things that we want. You can go this path, by the way, where it's super clean and you don't have like roots or anything like that, or routes. The same word. I don't know why I'm flipping between the two. But it also could be something where maybe you want to give it a little more context in the code for readability. So you can put this here, and we can and import this. So now when you read the code, you know exactly where this is coming from. So other people that will see this, they're like, oh, I get it. I know exactly. Same with the URI. The URI, it's pulling from this URI. There we go. So same bit here, except for it's not roots, it's this. So now we don't have to import anything. It's pulling from the client within the same Kotlin test. So again, you're having a more readable code by doing this. So now that we've moved those things over, now we want to be able to, we moved it here. We want this function, when we make this call, to give us and return something. And we want that to be the response. And I'll explain why we want this to be the response. At least this is, again, why I like to make it be response instead of the body or something like that. Because there's a world you want the headers, or you want the body, or you want maybe the status code. There's a lot of things that you don't know really what you need. So it's always good to say, hey, give me the response and then let me handle in my test what I want from this call. You're going to get a little bit of an error here because it's saying, hey, we need the return type response. And this is where this extract block comes in. And the thing we want to return is response. And then at the very top level, we want to say return, because this whole entire chain is gonna, at the very last bit, is the thing we want to return. And you can return other things. You can return body or status code or whatever that may be. But again, I like response. So going back to my test, I can start to remove, well, actually we don't want to remove stuff yet. The reason behind making these calls as clients is not necessarily to use these in your tests to test this endpoint. The reason you want to create this kind of function is for you to use it in a test that is kind of supplementary or supporting maybe data collecting or something for the call or function that is under test. And what's under test here is this get booking call. So I'm gonna build that right now, and you'll kind of see what I'm talking about as I start to flesh this whole thing out. Starting with given, and looking at this, we have a, for the get booking call, it has a header and a path parameter. I'm gonna show how to implement those in your calls. So in the given block, you can type in the word header, and you'll see that there's a bunch of different ways to set a header. You can have a header object that you can specify somewhere, and then you can access and put in. You can just go string var or any. We're gonna go with this path, and I'm gonna put in accept, which is a pretty common header for REST calls. Now the second thing is you're gonna add, this one takes in a string, and this one takes the application JSON. And for those who are not familiar with what the accept is, this is saying, when I make this call, this is what I want the response body format to be. So maybe you want it XML or JSON or something. You can establish what this is. Now you should look at the call and make sure you know what it supports and everything like that. In our case, we're going to use JSON. 95% of everything you will test will be using JSON. The other 5%, if you guys are lucky enough to mess with some other data structures, fantastic. But we're going to work with JSON for most of these tutorials. So this is how you establish your header. Now, there are certain things that are kind of common, and it's always good to use a variable instead of a string if it's established elsewhere. And RestAssured does supply something like this, and that is content type. And I'm going to try to go, I'll show you here, the IO RestAssured HTTP, it comes with a content type. I think other ones will do it too, maybe this JDK here and things, but We're going to keep it with RestAssured dot. And now you'll notice some of these types here: JSON, any, XML, HTML, text. So this is a good way for you to kind of set up and establish, make sure there's no typos in your strings and stuff like that. So I think it's always good for anything that's reusable or common, you're gonna use a lot, make sure to use the variable. So we have the header, except. Second is going to be a path param. And what a path param is, if I go to I'll show you my path, and we're going to create a new path. And this one is the our route, which is just get booking. And this will look like this. Now you'll notice that this one is in brackets, curly brackets. And that is saying this path, I keep saying path, you know what, we're going to do this. I keep saying path. It is a path. Let's do this. Refactor, rename, let's do path. Just keep calling path. This one has curly brackets, and whatever you put in here is gonna establish what the path param is. So when you use this in a call, so if I go back to my when, I call the get call, I put my get booking, which is the paths here. You need to establish what that path param is. And you do that up here, and you have to match it as the same. And this could be anything too. Just because the documentation says ID, I can name this foo. I can name this one foo. And as long as your thing here says foo, this will work just the same. But obviously keep context, keep it clean, match it with documentation. That's the key. So now we have header, path param, and we have our get. And then lastly, we're going to then verify that our status code is in fact a 200, because it has to be a valid response. And I do want to put in log.all so we can see this when we make this call. But what I want to do is not just establish, well, I'll put this here so we can see what the call looks like, and then I'll chain the two get calls together. So now if you look at this, it's saying localhost 8080 booking /123. You see that my header is accept application JSON. My path param is ID 123, which is great. You do see a little bit of an issue with this local host, and that is because I only submitted a path that is relative, and I don't have a URI established. So it's going to default to localhost. So what we want to do is give our base URI and make sure that we use the booking client URI here. So this is the thing we forgot. Make sure we're doing it all right here. Okay, cool. So made a call, 123. There it is. And we got a response, John Smith. Fantastic. What we want to do though is chain two together and take data from one and extract it from the other. And this is where this function calls. Now, again, like I said, this is not the call under test. This is the call that is under test. So it's important that we make sure that we are putting our status code, our asserts, everything with the thing that is under test. This is just a helper function to get us to we're going to extract an ID from this and put it into this call. So we don't need to make 100 different functions that are going to make a call with a negative or 400 or 500. It's going to make your code unwieldy and very complicated, overly complex. I personally like to do it this way. And this is only, give me the positive thing. I need this thing to do something for me and come back and give me the thing I need. I also realize that this is calling, these have query parameters. We're going to take that out because we just want all of them. So we have our call. And again, this is returning our response. And maybe we can give it a little more context. Get ID, get booking IDs, response, or you can say response, like whatever you like. I'm very verbose in my variable names only because I want people to really know like what this thing is. So This will give me the response. And it's also good to, I'm going to add this so we know, again, readability. So this is going to give me a response. Now, from here, I'm going to pass in, well, I need to extract from the body one of the IDs. So I can do two things here. I'm going to just do it here. So I can say get this dot body dot, we do JSON path. I think that's fine. Dot, we want to get, this is returning an int. Oh, let's see something. I want to see this kickoff here. So it made the call. There's our million IDs. For input string, number format exception. Okay, yeah, I figured. So I was trying to give me, this is supposed to be in number. That's not what this is. This is a string. This is a list of numbers. So get list. Here we go. This should do it. So let's just do a quick debug here and check what test ID is. So, oh, there we go. Test ID is 150. So, okay. So I did it right this time. Because it is a member, I told you if I call booking ID, it will take all the booking IDs and put them into a list. So we're going to get the list. So I'm going to continue on and let's see how this happened. So the first one's 150. So scrolling down all the way down. Our next call, so now we've passed in 150. See how our ID is 150, and we have John Smith and all that information. So so now we are chaining our different things together. This is just again a good example of kind of how you should start thinking about setting up your calls, coming here, putting the call you need, coming back here, right, into your test, and then being able to call these and then get the things you need so that you can run your test. Because this is remember, this is the thing that is under test, not this. I do want to add that we want the ability to pass in some query parameters, because you notice I deleted them from here, but we do want to consider these as something that we want to maybe call or add in the future. You've seen query params, but we're going to do something kind of creative. And we're going to create a QParams. So QParams. And this will be a map of string, which is the key, and then any type. And then, because we're in Kotlin, the cool thing is we can overload our functions, and we only need one function. And this is the really cool part of Kotlin. So this is overloading our function. And by doing that is saying, I have query params or QParams. If I call this without setting this parameter, I will just make this set as map of, so an empty map. So if you look over here, no error. But if I remove the default, see, now it's yelling at me, hey, where's QParams? So now putting this default value, it's telling me that you don't need to, you can call this without QParams. And the second part of this is we are going to add query params by passing our QParams parameter. And if we pass a map of parameters into our function here, it will then apply them to this call. If we do not pass anything in and it passes an empty map, nothing will be added at all. And now we get to make this call without query params. So you get like best of both worlds. Again, this function is to help us, not the thing we're trying to test. That is something you do up above where we make the calls and we pass in our specifics. Again, we want to be very clear and explicit what we're testing. So now that we're doing this, I'll show you an example. So we have query params, and this takes in like a first and last name. So I'm going to make this call down below. And now we're not really writing a test. I'm just showing you how we can just kind of chain some things. But return, and like I said, extract, and the thing we're going to extract is the response, and not return. We want a value is get booking response. Oh, equals. Okay. And we need the ID from this. So we are going to, oh, there we go. We can call it like this as well. You don't need to say body. I forgot. You can just go straight to JSON path if you really wanted to. And we are going to get, so this has a bunch of like data from it. And what we want is we just want to get the get string first name, because this returns a single object. So get string first name. Let's do this. Make our code readable, right? First name equals this. There we go. Now we need to submit our map. So this is our Q params equal map of, and according to the documentation of the get booking IDs, I can pass a first name query param field. Oops, that's optional. We just want first name. And we're going to map this to our first name and pass this in as our query param map. So if I run this, we are going to now, it looks like we're receiving where is it? Here it is. So our first name equals John, because that is the name of the first name we extracted from this line, gave us first name John. And we now have according to the API, every booking ID is supposed to be John. So if we wanted to properly really test this one, right, we can say, if your first names are John, then we will I'm going to call this again. I know I'm just call this, and let's see. We make that call. We get booking IDs. We get a bunch of IDs from this val response. And from the response, we want to take the first get list. We're doing this again. We're essentially doing this thing right here. Yeah. And we're going to get like the fifth one, because it's supposed to be, they're all supposed to have the same first name, supposedly. My ID under test. So we have that. Then we pass that into our function here, which will get booking. And we just need to make sure that the first name here, first name equal to first name. So let's take it back. We call booking IDs. This will give us a list of IDs. From that call, we are going to get all the booking IDs, and we're going to get the first one. From that first one, we're going to call get booking ID. We're going to call our get booking by passing in an ID, and that will return us a name, last name, a bunch of data. We're extracting that response into this object, and we're going to get the first name from that. And from that first name, I am going to pass that in as a query parameter and call booking IDs again and say, give me all booking IDs that have this first name. And we're going to get this huge list, and I am going to pull the fifth one from that. And I'm going to store that ID, and I'm going to pass it again back into our IDs to verify that this is in fact, the first name is the same. So here we go. Okay, so it passed. Um, our booking ID 430's first name was in fact John. So fantastic, we've done it. I want to be clear. This is me just kind of showing you how chaining functions will start to kind of work. I just was, this is kind of a silly test, but I just really want to show how your test will start to get a little bit complicated and larger, and how, even just having this call as something I have as a helper function instead of having all this code really starts to shrink down your tests. And I think the second thing I would end up doing as well would be taking this, extracting this out. So it'd be call, which would be only a few lines, save, call, and then this is the thing that we're testing, right? Make sure that the name is the same. So I really hope this was really insightful and helpful, and kind of seeing and exercising a little bit more of the rest assured kind of calls. And we showcased what it is to add headers, add path params. We showed like kind of what I consider as a good model to kind of store things, and have client model with like the calls that we can use to help. And again, not for testing. These are the things we need and call to get us through to the test. Yes, I do know that you make this call and it does test it kind of implicitly. But again, when you look at your code here, your asserts should be very clear of what the thing is testing. So yeah, so that was, this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it. Please comment, and like, and let me know some of the things you liked or didn't like, things I can improve. I think that'd be really fantastic. So until then, I'll see you guys online.